Hello, everybody. Good morning. It's David Nabarro here. We're just assembling, 3 minutes to go, but I wanted to thank you for joining. Thank you for coming early. And just to say that I can recognize names and I'm very pleased that you're with us. Don't hesitate to put any questions into the chat. That would be great. Just a particular shout out to Shirley. It's nice to be with you again. Thank you very much for joining. Everybody who's joining, welcome. It's nice of you to come in. This is just the opening moment. We are 2 minutes away from starting. We will be doing the briefing. We won't use, for my part, slides. It'll just be words. But we will refer you to material so that, and the purpose is that we think in Zooms it's easier to be able to just concentrate on one communications medium, and the one that we will use is voice. That means also checking that you can hear me okay, and if you can't, Thomas, I can see you with your nice blue background. If you can't hear me for any reason, or if it comes across wonky, please make some, gesticulate with your hands, because you're the top left-hand person on my screen. There you go. Just greetings to everybody who's joined. World Farmers Organization, good to see you here. Utakola, nice to see you again. Maria Lord, thank you very much for joining. Nice to be connected. Edward, hello, nice to see you and welcome you. Anya Donahue, who's the powerhouse behind the Food Systems Dialogues program. Nice that you're here. Also welcome to Twee, who manages all the communications, and Will Ramsey, who's doing all the back office and front part as well, associated with the Summit Dialogues website that I'll refer you to during the briefing. Hello to Richard China, nice to see you. Thank you very much for joining. Stefania Amato, great that you're here too. Marlene Schuppat, who works with us together with Florence Lasben, both Marlene and Schuppat doing a huge amount to help us in 4SD to support the Food Systems Dialogues process in the summit. There's Florence just lit up her video, and Marlene is not far away. Thank you. A nice message, Julia. Thank you very much indeed for writing it. I see we're at the top of the hour. I'm going to wait another minute and then I will start. I will go straight in 1 minute's time. It's always nice for people to spare an hour for an event like this. I'm super aware that you're all really busy. Don't hesitate while we're doing the briefing to be thinking of ways in which it can be made more helpful. We love feedback. Just a big greeting to Professor Patrick Carroll, who has such an important role in the science group for the Food Systems Summit. It's nice to see you, Patrick. Thomas from Wangeningen, nice to see you here. Thank you, Thomas, for sending a message in the chat. Nick Chisholm, great to see you again. Thank you for joining. Very nice. Simon Ritza, nice to see you. All of you coming, and here's Nina Sajjanani. Hello, Ibu Nina, joining from Jakarta. How lovely to see you. And Alison Cairns, thank you very much for joining us from the Secretariat of the Food Systems Summit. How nice. Very, very good. Just about to start. So Alison, just checking, because we have not communicated by email, under the previous schedule, Adam Gerstenmaier was going to speak for 5 minutes after I've done my 2-minute opening. I just want to check, is there a change in the Secretariat participation, or is Adam still expected to speak?
I'm stepping in for Adam.
Okay, so
yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, so I pass you the floor after my introduction. Okay, thank you very much indeed. So everybody, thank you very much for joining this first open public briefing on the Food Systems Summit Dialogues. Here is David Nabarro. My responsibility is to be a senior advisor to the Dialogues program in the Food Systems Summit. The organization that I work with, called 4SD, it's a Swiss-based social enterprise, has been engaged by the Secretariat of the Food Systems Summit to support a program of Food Systems Summit dialogues between now and the summit, and then indeed after the summit as well. I'm going to offer around 25 minutes of briefing on the dialogues program. That will be done just orally. I will not use slides. And the purpose will be to situate the dialogues program into the broader summit experience. I am anticipating that I will stop talking in time for around 30 minutes of questions and answers. Please use the chat function if you want to just indicate to us that you wish to send a question. Also, when the time comes, we will be able to pick up if you also create a visual gesture. And just to say that we are recording this briefing, and that recording will be available. So if you or anybody else want to check on what was said, please just stand by for the recording, and we will indicate clearly where the recording will be located so you can find it. It's a great pleasure that I turn first to Alison Cairns, who is a member of the Food Systems Summit Secretariat, working directly with the Special Envoy, Dr. Agnes Calabata, just to make some opening remarks on behalf of the Secretariat. Alison, you have the floor.
No, well, thank you very much, David. And I just do want to congratulate David and his team for the work in developing the Food Systems Summit dialogues. They are a really key work stream for the summit. One of the different components that you will hear about, because we wanted to make this a people summit. We want to make it inclusive. We want to have a global dialogue and global conversation, and the Food Systems Summit Dialogues is one of the ways that we are actively doing that. There are key dialogues that will take place in countries, because David very much challenged the summit to recognize that this isn't about being top down. It's about being, from the ground up, because food systems are not just global, but they're very, very local. They're culturally specific as well. And therefore, there's a real sort of desire to really understand what food systems means in country, and having not just one dialogue, but seeking to have a number to get that sort of deep engagement. More broadly, we have the independent dialogues where anyone can have a dialogue in their communities, and that will also be taken into the content for the summit as well. I think what Agnes has been challenging us to do is to, one, make this a people summit, two, to hold dialogues in every country around the world, which is no mean feat, but also to have as many independent dialogues as well, to really get a good sense of the challenges in the food system, but also how we can move this forward. I'm really not going to say much more, but just once again, there's an enormous amount of work that's been put into developing this journey that we will go on, and really handing back to you, David, with great thanks for the work that you've done to date.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Alison. So here is how I will structure the briefing, building off the remarks from Alison Cairns. Thank you again. I'm going to start with some general comments on what we've learned about the power of dialogue when trying to influence the direction of food systems. Then I'm going to talk about dialogues within the context of the Food Systems Summit. Then I'm going to go into detail on the Food Systems Summit Dialogues program, and I will do a detailed run through elements of the program. And then I'm going to finish with our view of what success means for the Food Systems Summit Dialogues. And that's when I will stop and leave space for your comments and questions. I want to really recognize a number of people who have joined. I can't mention them all by name now, but there are people on this briefing who've been working with the Food Systems Dialogues effort for many months. And I'd just like to acknowledge that it's on the basis of their work and their experience that we are offering the Food System Summit Dialogues right now. So we're going to have to witness a big change in food systems in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development if we're going to have a world where nature is able to flourish, where climate change is mitigated, where those who produce food have decent livelihoods, where consumers can access food that is good for nutrition and health, where the position of women who make up so much of what happens in food systems can be made really more satisfactory, and to a point where trade really starts to improve. There has to be a change. Some make quite strong statements about the urgency for change. Others perhaps are more relaxed. But the UN Secretary General has been very clear that food systems do have to adapt, and adapt a lot, if the goals of sustainable development are going to be achieved. And that's really what we're all about. But you see, food systems are really complex. They involve multiple stakeholders. There are many differences of opinion on how they should change. And it's not simply a case of one small group of people telling everybody else what they've got to do. We have to find a way to work with the perspectives of many different stakeholder groups and to do it locally, because food is a local issue. And moving from what's got to be done to where, how, and with whom it has to happen is what we've been looking at. Now, when it comes to food, there is so much dialogue and exploration happening all the time. And food systems are constantly evolving. There are so many influences on how they evolve. And there's also an awful lot of involvement of local government, national government, and even international governance and policies. And this is carried through in multiple jurisdictions. So it's not enough just to view food as an issue to be navigated between different groups of actors. The role of governments and the role of regulatory bodies is also hugely important. And we've had a chance to explore this complexity and to find ways of working with that complexity without being overwhelmed by it through the program of food systems dialogues that's been in operation for the last 2 years. And we've noticed a couple of things. That if we widen our connections and deepen our interactions when we're looking at food through a multi-stakeholder process, then positions shift. And it becomes possible to establish new forms of alliance and joint working that otherwise just were really elusive. And the second thing we've found is that repeating the process of dialogue at intervals really does make that shift more likely to occur. It's as though, having been exposed to different ways of thinking about things, a period of time before re-exposure can be very helpful. So what we've seen through the dialogues that have been undertaken, involving over 2,000 people in the last 2 years, is that by exploring complexity through different perspectives, there's actually quite an exciting moment when people feel that they can shift and that they can consider ways of achieving greater sustainability, but that they can do it in ways that don't have to involve suffering and deprivation among groups of people. That instead, through dialogue, it's possible to chart pathways that take account of the interests of different people, that take account of the interests of the planet, and that can do so with trade-offs that are not perhaps as painful as had previously been thought. But it's not up to us just to say this. What matters is that everybody has an opportunity to test out the dialogue process for themselves. And actually, the Food Systems Summit, as Alison Cairns just said, is being designed in a really unusual way. Instead of a small group of people saying, this is what you all have to do, and everybody else deciding whether or not they'll go along with it, the summit has been set up as a process through which there'll be really widespread interaction, debate, discussion, dialogue, in order to try to find better ways of moving forward. I think that what I'm seeing about the dialogues is that within the summit, they will offer options for connections to be made and the scope of thinking about food to be expanded, seeing all kinds of possibilities that lie ahead, and using the totality of the Sustainable Development Agenda, all 17 Sustainable Development Goals, as the canvas on which we all work. So those are my opening remarks. Now I'd like to go specifically into what the Special Envoy for the Food Systems Summit is encouraging us to do. So she'd like dialogues to be used as a specific method for thinking through transformation in food systems, a method that can be adapted in different settings. As Alison said, the first thing she's asking is that any individual or organization with an interest in exploring food from multiple perspectives should be enabled to participate in dialogue. There should be no barrier. And so that's the first thing that I want to say, that the Food Systems Dialogues program for the summit is open to all. Now, there's a special variant of this program for governments. That's called the Member States Dialogues Program. That's where governments are invited to involve themselves in a progressive process where they use dialogues to help them think through the future of their food systems. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I want you to hold on to the rather special situation of member state or government-run dialogues. This is something that Dr. Kalibata, as envoy, would like all 193 countries in our world to have a chance of doing. And then there's going to be a smaller set of dialogues that Dr. Kalibata herself will run in the margins of major international events. And that's the Global Dialogues Program. So there's independent dialogues that anybody can do. There's the national dialogues that governments will organize. And then there's the global dialogues that are run in the margins of big events. Now, the participants in these dialogues are invited to come together in ways that reflect the 7 principles of the Food Systems Summit. And 2 of these principles are really important and have been accentuated by the UN Secretary General since he decided to have the summit. The first is that it's urgent to shift food systems so they're sustainable. It's not something that can just be done in 10 years' time or 5 years' time. This is urgent for all sorts of reasons. In economic terms, the hidden costs of food systems are just huge and almost outweigh the value of those systems in absolute financial terms. But it's not just the hidden costs, it's also the real costs in terms of health, environment, climate, livelihoods, trade, gender, any other issue. It's got to be dealt with. So that was principle that I want to highlight, number 1. And principle I want to highlight, number 2, is the importance of inclusion, that everybody should be involved, not just a small number of people who've got power determining how food systems are going to move, but really including all different actors. And this has been really explained to me and others very clearly by Dr. Kalibata, is just make sure that the principles are reflected in the dialogues and take them seriously. Also, Dr. Kalibata is saying, when you organize dialogues in countries, don't just look at where food systems are now, look at where they are going to. Look at the arc of travel of food systems. Think 10 years ahead. What's the desired state of food systems? Example, food systems should enable all involved in food production and processing to have a decent standard of living. Yes, but if we look at the moment, people who work in food are some of the worst paid people in the world. And with COVID, they're some of the people who are most exposed to the virus. So there's work to be done inside food systems for the people who work in them. And in the other area that I think is clearer and clearer is that there's work to be done to make sure that food systems enable everybody to access the nutrition they need. In fact, the summit has set up a series of 5 action tracks that are particularly focusing on the future of food systems and actually help us to identify the 5 areas that need most attention: access to nutrition, shift in diets towards healthy and sustainable eating, nature positive production so that nature is not damaged in food production and processing, decent livelihoods for everybody working in food. Probably more than 2.5 billion people in our world depend on food for their livelihoods, and more than 3/4 of them are women. Are the people who work in food properly remunerated? And then 5th, are food systems and the people working in them enjoying resilient livelihoods, or are they being buffeted around by all sorts of different stresses? These are the 5 big action tracks of the summit, and we're going to use those as an organizing frame for some of the dialogues if people want. because they help us to think through the choices and trade-offs associated with different policies and their implementation. And the dialogue process has one really great virtue, and that is that by bringing different people together, focusing on convergence, but also divergence, so accepting that not everybody will agree, but using the dialogue process and the structured environment of dialogues to really be looking at the kind of pathway that we should all seek to follow towards the sustainable food systems of the future. And indeed, as the dialogues progress during the coming months, we expect a deepening exploration and a collective prioritization of the themes that will be the basis of pathways to sustainable food systems by 2030. And beyond that, we're anticipating that intentions and commitments of different stakeholders, be they in business, in farming, in fishing, in civil society, in local authority, in national government, in science, wherever, commitments from these different stakeholders will lead to an acceleration of efforts along the pathways towards sustainability. And these commitments can be reflected in the summit in September 2021. So now to the concrete part. Actually, okay, I want to organize a dialogue. I'd like to be a convener. Could you help me? That's what you might be saying. So let me just tell you a bit about the different people who are involved. If there's going to be a dialogue, somebody has to take responsibility for planning and organizing and executing the dialogue. And the word we use for that is dialogue convener, C-O-N-V-E-N-O-R. There's always a debate about whether it's O-R or E-R. We're using O-R. This convener has some responsibilities. When it comes to national dialogues, then the country is asked to appoint a national dialogue convener. When it comes to independent dialogues, the person who wishes to be a convener can appoint themselves. Once the convener is identified, that then is really important for the system, because within the summit secretariat, these conveners have a very special role. The convener is an organizer. The convener is a connector. The convener is a systems thinker. The convener is an entrepreneur. The convener is a synthesizer. That's what we need for the person who's going to take overall responsibility for organizing one or more dialogues. When you actually get into the dialogue, the convener may not be the person who necessarily stands at the front of the room. If we can stand in a room with a microphone, then you may need somebody who's got specific skills. You may need a curator who presides over a dialogue event, welcoming the 60 or so participants, introducing high-level guests, describing the purpose of the dialogue, and then summarizing what happens in the dialogue. The curators tend to be charismatic people. Also, they're systems thinkers, but they're empathetic. They involve everybody. They're trustworthy. They're knowledgeable. And then inside dialogues, we split into discussion groups, usually 8 to 10 people around a table if we can meet. Each of those discussion groups has a facilitator who ensures that participants have an opportunity to contribute meaningfully and have their perspectives heard by others. The facilitators are mediators. They're catalytic. They're, again, empathetic. And sometimes they remain rather invisible, but they're the heart of the dialogues process. Now, of course, with COVID, meeting is not so easy. And so what we're doing is we're organizing for dialogues to be made possible through using online meeting platforms like the one we use today, Zoom, or like Teams or others. Now, to be really useful, an online meeting platform needs to have the facility for breakout rooms. And without that, it doesn't really work. So if you're going to use an online meeting platform, we can offer you advice. we can give you our experience because we've done quite a lot with this approach. We can also offer you a manual if you're a convener of dialogues. It's available already on www.summitdialogues.org. Some of you would like help to organize dialogues. We can offer you some support through the website, through an email address, info@summitdialogues.org. And also all around the world, there are groups who are keen on the dialogues. They are part of the development partner community. They're part of the UN. They're parts of other organizations active on the future of food. Just really don't hesitate to access them. We are making sure that everybody who's got responsible positions in the UN knows about the Food Systems Summit dialogues, particularly the UN resident coordinators. We're making sure that the Food Systems Summit champions know about the Food Systems Summit dialogues. We're briefing NGOs, we're briefing scientists. If you feel there are groups we need to brief, don't hesitate to let us know. The more people who know about it, the more support is available. A food system dialogue typically consists of two core elements. One is when you have discussion groups who actually talk about the future of food with multiple stakeholders in groups of about 10. And then the second is when you pull together the outcomes of these discussion groups, perhaps 5 or 6 discussion groups in a summary session. Recommended duration of a food systems dialogues, at least 2.5 hours and probably 4 hours. I'd like there to be at least 60 minutes and ideally 80 minutes for the discussion session. A recommended number of participants, well, we don't think it works if you have more than 100. We do think that you should be comfortable to split into groups of 8 to 10. And so around 8 discussion groups of 8 or 10 is between 60 and 80. That's your ideal. Of course, sometimes you have to have bigger meetings, but this is where we're trying to suggest it. We do suggest also that there's a series of dialogues, each one building on the learnings from the previous one, positive and sustainable system change being encouraged through what we sometimes call a progression of dialogues. And that's up to whoever wants to organize. I think the most important point that we keep saying is, please make sure there is diversity. There's no point in people just sitting and talking to those they normally talk to. The whole purpose of dialogue is to widen and deepen, widen the way in which you look at food and deepen your explorations. And that's why keep that diversity, make unusual connections in the dialogue. As you're planning a dialogue, if you're a convener, let me talk to you. First of all, do think about the focus of your dialogue. I mean, there'll almost always be a specific aspect of food systems that you want to dive into in greater detail. We like it if they're kind of looking at some of the contrasting aspects of food system. One group recently looked at the relationship between food systems and women and looked specifically at the challenges faced by women in food systems. Another group looked at the links between those who produce food and those who consume food. So we had farmers meeting with consumer organization representatives. Other dialogues have looked at the relationship between food and climate change. Others are looking at food and nutrition. I mean, in some dialogues, you might be able to look at the whole lot, and that's great. But others may need to focus down on specific issues. And some of you may think, well, I've got an issue that I really want to be looked at through dialogue, and I want to specialize in that. I'd say, fine, but please have the diversity. Don't just have everybody who thinks exactly the same. Otherwise, it doesn't advance. It's just what we sometimes refer to as the echo chamber. When you are having a dialogue, you will be setting up discussion groups, about 8 to 10 people, as I say. Each one of those is given a discussion topic to look at, and the discussion topic will usually be about the desired state of the food system in 10 years' time, really trying to encourage us to be ambitious, to stretch our thinking to a situation where We're hoping that all those who are involved in food production and processing get a decent wage and produce sustainably and mitigate climate change and produce food that's nutritious and healthy, and make sure that all those, particularly who are involved in the food system, involved in trading and so on, are doing it in a fair and correct way. So look 10 years ahead, but focus on changes that can be done in the sort of next year or two. So you focus on things to do now in the current realities to help move where we've got to go to in 10 years. As discussion groups finish, they've come to an agreement on where we need to be active now to make the 10-year change. The facilitator is actually helping each discussion group to think through what needs to happen and how we'll know when it happens. It's a lovely process when you see this happening over the hour and a bit. There will have to be some writing of what happens during the discussion group into a template, and the curator of a bigger dialogue event asks the facilitators to produce their feedbacks. And at the same time, the facilitators are invited to explain to everybody else what happened in their discussion group. These 5-minute report backs are key. They should be full of feelings. They should be identifying tensions as well as agreement. They should be pointing out that in multi-stakeholder dialogue, it's always a process of mutual exploration. And this feedback in the individual discussion groups collected together by the curator, and they put the results into a feedback report form, which is then loaded up onto the Dialogues Gateway website and becomes the result of the dialogue that everybody who's at the dialogue can look at and say, yeah, we did that. But then that result is linked to other dialogues and it's synthesized. And this is particularly important in the progression of dialogues within countries, because in the dialogue progression in countries, you start with at the national capital with the leaders of the different stakeholder groups talking. And then in stage 2, you go subnationally and do more detailed dialogue in subnational groups. And that's when the magic happens, because that's when you're getting lots and lots of different perspectives from local level, and the opportunity to then bring those perspectives together at the end of stage 2, taking you into stage 3, where you shape the pathway to the sustainable national food system, building on existing plans and strategies. And all that process, we believe, can happen between now and June next year, when the pre-summit is due to take place, actually June or July. All this can link with the other parts of the summit, with the action tracks and with the scientific group, because if the action tracks are offering their statements, their propositions about what needs to happen, then the people in the national dialogues or in the independent dialogues or in the global dialogue can be reflecting on what's coming through from the action tracks. And that will be happening particularly at the beginning of next year, between January and June. So lastly, just a word or two about the support we offer and what success will feel like. We, that's the team that I'm working with, will accompany you, the potential conveners, if you want to be, throughout the Food Systems Summit dialogue process. We will maintain this website, www.summitdialogues.org. And we'll make sure that that is got as up-to-date an exploration of the process, both the independent dialogues process and the national dialogues, up to date as we can. We're still updating it, it's happening, but it's already open for registration. You can subscribe to the newsletter and you can make certain that you are inside the family of potential conveners. We call it the Dialogue Gateway, and it will have the handbooks. It will help you to access training. It'll help you to create and manage your own dialogues. It'll contain a help desk and a way to get feedback from other dialogues. And the trainings that we're offering are coming up really soon. And we will also offer a facility to develop synthesis reports for the summit. So the dialogues are special, quite simply because they will bring unusual voices in. The discussion topics focusing 10 years ahead give us a really good way of focusing in the arc of travel to where we want to get to. Through the dialogues, we can widen our systems view. I call it the wide angle view. The dialogues offer a really good feedback system and then opportunities for synthesis. And so it is Agnes Calabata's hope and our hope and the hope of the Summit Secretariat and the Deputy Secretary General that this whole process will lead to increased local ownership of work on food systems, an increased sense of community, an inclusive and diverse community working on food systems, a way ahead that's based on what's coming through the science group, the action track, supported by the Champions Network, that's focusing on the pathway to the future, something that can stay after the summit, a deep and wide exploration, and then some commitments coming out of it that will be good for the summit. So thank you very much. Now we'll look at some of the comments that have come in. First of all, Susanna Brown has written in. Susanna, I hope you won't mind if I just say what you were saying, but if at any point I don't get it right, please unmute yourself and just come in and shout away. Susanna has said, how do you find out who is the national convener in your country? A very straight request. So last week, the Deputy Secretary General of the UN wrote to the permanent representatives of all countries and said, please could you appoint a national convener? Once those national conveners are nominated and appointed, this information will appear on the Summit Dialogue website in the gateway, and that will be visible. If for any reason that information is not available and you have a United Nations resident coordinator in your country, please check with the UN resident coordinator. She or he may have some information. If you're really stuck, obviously, you contact us at info@summitdialogues.org. We will do our best to help. There will be a bit of uncertainty over the next few weeks as countries are working out who to appoint as national dialogues conveners. And I am appreciative that some of you may want to ask us to alert you. We'll do our best, but really the summitdialogues.org website is the means through which we hope you will be able to access the information you need. Suzanne Ritzer of Wageningen. Hello, Suzanne. Simone Ritzer of Wageningen, I'll say it again, has sent in a question. Simone, thank you. You say, do we recommend one convening organization for an independent dialogue, or do we recommend a diverse group to be involved in the organization? And then you say also, Simone, is there a way to link with other organizations that are interested so that we step out of our bubble? We encourage groups to come together to organize independent dialogues. We really do. I've already mentioned that in some of my examples, and I truly recommend it. If you want to be involved in dialogues, do register on the Dialogues Gateway website. We will try, especially if you tell us that you want us to link you with others. We obviously will make that effort. And remember that we're going to be operating in multiple languages. We're part of UN process. This will facilitate things for some of you. We will be operating in all 6 of the UN languages, plus Portuguese, that's 7, and that will help to do it. So please step out of your bubbles, Simone, and we look forward to following up with you over time, because that point you've made there is important. And Simone's coming again. Is there a way you envision the harvesting of all dialogues to contribute to the action tracks? We have an absolute commitment to harvest and synthesize the results of all of the member state-run dialogues. This is inside our arrangement with the summit organizers, And so we will be doing that. It's the production of syntheses that appear every 3 months. We will be doing that in a very public way. We will be encouraging a number of different organizations to synthesize the reports of the independent dialogues. And by the way, everything will be designed to contribute to the summit as a whole, to the individual action tracks, to any of the other levers of change that are emerging. But there's also going to be a real opportunity for other groups, not ourselves who are inside the summit process, but for groups who perhaps got very different perspectives on things to do their own synthetic work. The outcomes of the dialogues will be publicly available on the Summit Dialogues website. That means that anybody who wishes can use the keywords, can use the action track check marks and other such things to do their own synthetic work. Simran, if you want to follow up, please don't hesitate to be in contact. And here's another colleague from Wageningen, Thomas Tichar, says he'd like to get the ball rolling on youth in food systems. Can we help and give guidance on the selection of a convener? In the manual that you can see, Thomas, I can see you looking at me, actually. We're right next door to each other on my screen. Great to see you smiling. In the manual, there's quite a lot, if you get a chance to download it from the summitdialogues.org website. There's quite a lot there about the kind of person who should become a convener. It's there. There are the characteristics of the convener. There are the tasks of the convener. There's a step-by-step guide for the convener. And I'm really keen that you look at that and just then throw it over to the groups that you want to work with and say, look, here's what they're recommending. Find us a convener. Nobody wants dialogues to be convened by somebody who does not have the skills at being the mistress or master of ceremonies. Nobody wants the dialogues to be convened by somebody who's super shy. You really do need to have somebody who's quite extroverted, quite comfortable, and also somebody who everybody respects as being able to get the best out of others. And so I am very, very keen that you actually offer that to others and say, find a convener. And let there be a few experiments as well. Now, there was another convener question. Okay. Can we have the convener and curator the same person? Absolutely. We are not saying you must follow the instructions that we offer. Our instructions are there really as guide. And I mean, it's not like a recipe when you're trying to cook something, and if you start fiddling around with ingredients, it can make a terrible mistake. Please don't hesitate to look at what's in the manual and experiment. I think you can have a convener and a curator the same person, especially if you're doing a rather small independent dialogue process. But if you're doing a big operation with 10 dialogues, it's quite useful to have different conveners, especially if the dialogues are in different places, or if they're using different languages. It's really difficult for the curator if they're not able to speak the same language as the people taking part in the dialogue. So I do view convener as up the top, the organizer. I do view the curator as the person who handles the dialogues, but we're never saying you must follow our instructions. To Janine Nichol, is there a schedule for dialogues at country or regional level so there's good coordination? Absolutely. One of the things that we're trying to do through the gateway, by making it desirable that those who are going to curate dialogues are known, those who are going to convene dialogues are registered. This is so that we can actually know the place where the dialogues are going to take place. So there'll be a map so that it'll be possible for anybody who wants to know who's doing dialogues in country A, who's doing dialogues in city B. Indeed, Janine, so that there is good coordination. We'd also love it if we can get some link between the independent dialogues and the national dialogues in a country, because otherwise there's no proper read across. So even if an independent dialogue is not being done within the broad national program, at least the national convener should know that a particular group is doing an independent dialogue. So that's the purpose of all this registration on the gateway. To Nick Rose, what's the deadlines for submitting the results of the dialogues? We like the results of the dialogues to be submitted quickly. Otherwise, people just forget. And we really like them to get the feedback form to come in to the website within 2 weeks of a dialogue. That's not least so that everybody else can see what's going on. If you're a national dialogues convener, the series really matters. You need to start, ideally before the end of this year, initiating the process. Then you need the deep exploration between January and April next year. And you need to pull the results from those deep exploration dialogues together quickly so that you're ready to devise your national pathway by May or June. Yes, please don't wait. And so I'm going to say, everybody who's a convener, get your results in within 2 weeks. Nick, I'm a bit fussy about that one. Ad spikers, come in, Ad. Can you unmute your mic? Last time I tried to get you in on a webinar I was doing, you had trouble with your mic. Give it a test. Say hello, Ad.
Yeah, good morning. Do you hear me?
Yeah, come in, Ad. Explain who you are and then give your comment, please. Quick.
Yeah, I'm Ad Spijkers. I'm now in the Netherlands, but I was closely working with you, David, and a team in Bangladesh. And I started my career in the UN 30 years ago in Vietnam, China.
Okay,
I want to
close to your mic. Speak close to your microphone. Get right up close. Thank you.
Okay. I want to propose, David, that the recent experience we had together in the program Feed the Future, how the UN, the civil society, and private sector can find a platform to tackle that important problem we are discussing this morning. When I compare my experience in the UN in Africa and Asia, I would very much encourage all the participants to keep a sharp eye on Africa, because there I think is a huge work to be done and possible. So in the national dialogues, I would like to propose to build on experiences in some countries where national dialogues were in fact already started. And in that respect, the UN can play an important role from WHO, UNICEF, FAO, UNDP, but how they can reach out also to include this time more actively the NGOs, the international NGOs, and in particular the national NGOs. Lastly, David, thank you very much. I saw you yesterday on BBC World, and you made a very candid statement on the vaccine on COVID-19, which always is, I think, on the priority of our minds, because we need to tackle this problem and we go more to tackle the problems of food security. Thank you.
Thank you. COVID-19 has exposed so many frailties and vulnerabilities in certain food systems, but it has also shown strengths in some food systems as well. And I think we as you've just said in your last remark, really need to take that seriously. Just to tell you about this guy, Ad Spikers, I've been working with him 20 years now, on and off, and he's somebody who's utterly committed to multi-stakeholder working, the power of bringing different groups of actors together to lead to positions being shifted in a really good way. Thank you for saying there is stuff happening in many countries and we can build on it, whether it's the CGIAR system, I can see Richard China on my screen, or the UN system, or different groups who come together, or regional and sub-regional bodies like the African Union Development Agency, or groups like the Malabo Panel. You know, let's build on what's being done. Let's not reinvent the wheel. So right, but widening those who are involved, not staying inside our echo chambers. Nick Rose, I've spoken to you. I hope that was okay. And then Janine, I told you about the schedule. Now, here's a question from Lucy Westerman. She says, do we have an estimate of how much time dialogue organizers put into coordinating, facilitating, and reporting on dialogues? I'm almost tempted to invite those of you who've organized dialogues to talk about it. And I'm not going to do that, but I am going to say, when you come to the trainings, this is something we go into. My rule of thumb is this: the more time you put in before a dialogue to identifying your potential participants, to making certain that your discussion topics are good, and then afterwards to developing and submitting a good report quickly. Doesn't mean a long report, but time before, time after makes a huge difference. And am I right, Arnie? Are you on? Where are you, Arnie? I'm looking for you. Yeah, Arnie, just give your view, please. He's the manager of the Dialogues program out of Oslo. What do you think?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Yeah, no, I support what David said there. The biggest piece of work here is identifying a broad and diverse bunch of participants, and that's the major task here. But the more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. So I encourage you all to participate in the training. Much more information there, so thank you all.
Now, do you agree with me, Arnie, that the training helps, that it helps to focus on the things that you need to prioritize in advance and afterwards? Just give me your feel on the training as an exercise, Arnie.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the experience to date with the over 200 that have been through the training process is that this has been very valuable. I see Milka's camera there. Milka's participated in the last training. If she's any succinct reflections on her experience, I think that would be much more valuable than hearing it from me. Milka?
Yeah, I've absolutely enjoyed it. It was eye-opening exercise. It made very clear, it clarified the roles of curator, facilitator. It explained the process. And I would have a question, and that is, would the Food Systems Summit Dialogue trainings now be different from the Food Systems Dialogue trainings? Like, will you add an extra layer? I see some difference already in the Food Systems Dialogue trainings. We were talking about what do we see happening in 3 years. Now we have moved to 10 years.
Yeah.
What's going to be the difference?
We've added extra layers so that, and it's not layers in a nasty way, we folded in extra layers because the dialogues for the Food Systems Summit are not just talking, they are talking and then establishing pathways for the future with this 10-year objective. And so that is now very much going to be an additional part of the training because it does have some implications. So Milka, we may need to invite you to join us again.
I'll be there.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, Nick Rose says, when do member states have to commit to a dialogue process? He doubts Australia will. Well, it's interesting how a number of countries that are not in the poorer country category have already told us they're going to do dialogues. I'm not going to say anything about Australia because I don't know enough. Not on the food side. We've been doing a lot with Australia on COVID. That's another story. Now, but Nick, do you know the first country that agreed to be participating in all this was Finland? We've had a really strong reaction from colleagues in other countries. I just feel a bit nervous about mentioning names, but it's picking up. So Nick, where are you at the moment? I see you've got a very interesting backdrop behind you. Where are you, Nick? Unmute.
I'm in Melbourne, which is just coming out of months of lockdown, David.
Yes, I'm, gosh, but well done to all of you in Australia for the solid approach that you've been adopting, like your Antipodean not quite neighbour called New Zealand. Very impressive, and stay the course, please, on COVID. Anything you want to say about the food stuff, Nick?
Oh, well, just, there's a lot of momentum, a lot of interest here. We're interested in potentially having dialogue with First Nations peoples in Australia. There's a lot of talk about reclamation of cultural heritage, Indigenous knowledge. There's a big push, or has been for some time, to commercialise bush foods, native foods in Australia, but very little of it is actually owned and controlled by First Nations peoples, Indigenous peoples. So We'd be very interested and would like to see that reflected in the dialogue process and in the summit itself, because we feel it's vitally important.
Brilliant, thank you, Nick. And just to say that Anna Main and colleagues in New Zealand have been doing the same, and I'm sure that you have many cross relationships on Indigenous people and food between the two countries, and this is going to be a strong focus of this summit. It clearly is, whether we're in the Northern Hemisphere, the more tropical areas in the Southern Hemisphere. Thank you for bringing it up. Great. Florence Pardew from the Food Foundation. I want you to just help us to think how we can get young people mingling with others so that they're not just talking amongst themselves. Florence, would you like the floor?
Hi, yes, thanks very much, David. So the Food Foundation are currently working on a global food systems project. We're bringing together multi-stakeholder conversations between youth, local authorities at city level, and also the private sector, investors. And we're focusing on our youth work. The first piece of work that we're doing is working with some global partners, including the World Association of Girl Guides, with the Sun Network, with WWF, and convening youth from across the world and creating a global youth charter, which we'll be launching next year, which is going to be co-created with those youth that we're engaging with. And through various means of engagement, we're going to be working with those youth to hold some dialogues at various events, and then we'll be taking a group of youth advocates to various events such as the UN FoodSystems Summit, to COP26. So we are inviting people from across the world who are working with youth groups to get in touch with us if you're interested in being part of those youth dialogues and in part of creating that charter as well.
Florence, could you make sure your email contacts are in the chat? Could Karina Millstone please be in touch with Florence? Could I just go to Edward Nizyima? Edward, I don't know where you are. Est-ce que vous êtes là? If you are, just unmute yourself. You could be the last speaker. We'll just give it a few seconds to see whether you can unmute. Yeah, Edward, where are you?
Hi, David. I'm in Rome. I'm working with World Food Program.
Welcome. Edward, would you like to just make your comment? I mean, I'm in a way wanting to turn your question back to you, but because you deal with this stuff every day in World Food Program. Over to you, Edward.
No, I just wanted to make sure that this dimension is taken into account. You know that we want something which is actionable, yeah. And there has been a lot of summit with some political commitments, yeah. And then you often see nothing in the field. So we just want something which produce some commitment, which are ready to transfer to the community, and then to make sure that we achieve SDG 2. Yeah. So that is the balance that I want us to make sure that in the conversation, in the dialogue, something like that comes out. Thank you.
Can I just say, why dialogue? Answer: to get really stuck into local reality, to be as practical as possible. So thank you, Edward, for making that point. I'd like to acknowledge that Vanessa Adams is on this call. Vanessa is in the Agra. Thank you very much indeed for your readiness. Alison, I see you're going. If you wanted to say anything before you go, you could do so now. There's Vanessa, great. Okay, Alison had to go to another meeting and time is up. Do you know, we had somewhere in the region of 15 comments or questions, which is really good. And there are still many people I know who would love to say a word or two. Again, Ibu Nina, I hope you found this helpful. And it was lovely to get the message from Jakarta saying you're interested in this process. There you can see Twee smiling at you. You might remember her from the Sun Movement. Let's like to really acknowledge Vanessa. Thank you for turning on your video. It's great. All that you do in Agra. There are many others, but from our team, as well as Florence Lasbens, who is very much leading on this, Marlene Schuppath, who has been really behind the briefing for today. She helped me with thinking through what we were going to say. Thank you, Marlene. I hope it was okay from your point of view. John Atkinson, who's doing the training program. If you'd just like to wave, John, so that everybody can see you. Tweet and Guyan, who handles the Summit Dialogues website and deals with all the promotion about these open briefings. Don't hesitate to be in touch with TWI, Saber Moumen, Magali Muddy, who are working on administration and training respectively. Big shout out to Patrick Caron for his role in the scientific group and just his continuous advocacy. I'm so sorry you've had to postpone the face-to-face Montpellier meeting that we're all looking forward to, but it will happen and it will be good when it does. And then everybody else, thank you for being with us, whoever you are. info@summitdialogues.org. And I see Million Ali saying a number of specific questions. Million, we will get in touch with you. If you put an email address into the chat, one of us will follow up with you, or you write to us on info@summitdialogues.org, info@summitdialogues.org. Yes, there will be a learning process for us all, but we will have fun. Can I give a special shout out, sorry I missed you before, to Charlotte Dufour. Some of you will remember Charlotte from her work in FAO, her brilliant work on nutrition sensitive agriculture. And it's with real joy that we've been able to benefit from Charlotte's work. And that's been particularly helpful on working out how to examine food systems. So I hate stopping these things, but it's time. We will be doing more and we will stay in touch, and we feel that we are all family. Sly and the Family Stone. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.